So, welcome back to another episode of the Half and Half Scarf Football Podcast with me, Nick, and my mate Dom. We're here to discuss a subject that's been suggested to us by our one of our regular listeners and big fans, Simon Jennison, who's a Barnsley fan. His wife Michelle, big fans of the podcast. So, thank you for your support with that one, Simon and Michelle. Simon suggested that he thinks we've been sold a pup when it comes to football, and football is more boring now than it was 10 or 15 years ago, and certainly in the 90s. Simon is a Barnsley season ticket holder and watches Barnsley at home every week, but he also is involved in Athersley Recreation up the Penguins, and he says that going to watch Athersley Recreation at that level, of course the football is not of the same standard. However, the blood and guts and thunder of two teams going at it is much more enjoyable than when Barnsley are trying to play out from the back and wedded to a system. So without further ado, to discuss all things around that, let's talk to Dom, my co-host, about is football more boring than it was 10 or 15 years ago? But before we do that, let's do the shirt thing as ever.
Hi Nick, yeah, great to be here, episode 14. Yeah, it's this is Everton's 2014-15 kit when we returned to Umbro after our fiasco with Nike. I like this one. Bit unusual for Everton. It's a darker kit, dark blue collar, which is almost bordering on black, and it's just got a little soft stripe through it. And it's how you. We had a good season that season. We're in the Europa League, and brings back some good memories. This kit, I like it.
Okay, I will say it's got the biggest sponsor on it ever. The Chang sponsor's huge.
Look at them, it's huge. Yeah, they always were. It's a bit of a that was always the drawback. Huge sponsor, I remember.
Imagine how crisp that would look with no sponsor. Anyway, moving on from that, I'm wearing the shirt you wore on episode 13, which is the classic Borough Hummel shirt. I just like it. It's got a lot going on. Great kit. So I'll say no more about that. So that's for our YouTube viewers who wonder what we wear. I've still got a dozen kits to go through for the next dozen episodes, and some will be snug and some won't be, but we'll go from there. So on to the episode. So again, Simon contacted me and he said, he's a regular listener and viewer, and his wife Michelle enjoys the podcast as well. He's a really good guy. Simon, I've known him for 20 odd years, probably longer. Proper football fan, Barnsley fan, speaks as it is, and he just thinks football, in his words, is now shite. And he said particularly at the top level, but even filtering down, and with all due respect, Barnsley are, a decent standard League One club. Hopefully they're going to have a good year this year. He said even at this level, he said it's getting to be tedious. Now, what's your view on that, first of all, before I give some praise to Man United? Don't touch on that yet. I'm going to start my bit of the podcast with praise for Man United, which is very unusual, by the way. What's your view on, is football more shite than it was 10 years ago?
I think he's got a good point. I think Simon's got a good point. I think my take on it is slightly different. I think it's more borne out of the fact that managers now are obsessed with trying to implement a certain way of football. And I think sometimes that implementing these certain ways of football can cripple their teams and make the boring more sterile and boring, when actually if they didn't always try and play to the same systems, which we'll come on to, it would be less boring. Because in the last 10, 15 years, I've watched some sensational football, but I've also watched some absolutely terrible football for both my teams. So I think Simon's got a really good point, and some of that is born out of style of play and the pressure on managers and teams to play a certain way and play to a brand of football that they think their fans want to see.
I don't think they think the fans want to see. I think quite often it's the arrogance of, it's my way, I'm going to implement this, whether you can play it or not, I'm going to do it. Because, you're not telling me that fans under Middlesbrough last season wanted to see the second half of last season under Michael Carrick, which was absolute tedium. I'll come to that in a minute. Right. Very briefly, you went to see, before the international break, we did a special episode, didn't we? A little half-hour episode on non-league football.
Yeah.
You went to 2 games. I don't know what level Athersley Recreation up the Penguins are, but you went to see 2 non-league games. Did you enjoy the blood and thunder of those 2 games?
I loved it. I loved both games. I was completely glued to both of them, and I really enjoyed myself. First one, Marine v Darlington, and Darlington won 4-1 at Marine. The second one was an FA Trophy match, Bootle against Witten, and Witten won 3-2. They were both fabulous games because, I went to Bootle and Witten obviously with the away team, and they went 3-1 up, and Bootle got to 3-2 and were chasing it for 3-3 to take it to extra time. So it was fabulous. It literally was end to end, and it was just so good to watch. There was none of this playing out from the back. There was the odd time where it merited it, but it was literally playing football to fit what was required in that match at that time, finding the right player and trying to be as threatening as you can. It was great. I loved it. Loved every minute of it.
Obviously, the standard of footballer and the standard of touch and play and passing and vision and all that kind of thing is nowhere near when we get talking about elite level footballers. But football's not about elite level football, is it? I would stand and watch, and I do. I live around the corner from a sort of a football pitch area. If I'm going for a walk and there's a game of football on, then I'll stand and watch, and I find myself being there for 20, 25 minutes watching our local village team having a game of football.
Yeah.
Cheering them on, thinking, go on, go get it. And I'm just the same fan as I am when I'm at Borough at home or away. I'm just wanting to see, somebody score a goal or, a bit of skill or whatever it might be. And I think football's lost a bit of that. I think you go back to what, you're saying that managers and coaches give the fans what they want. I'm not sure they do, but let me start with my praise for Man United, okay? I'm a massive football fan. Obviously, season ticket holder, home and away at Middlesbrough. I watch a lot of football internationally, with German football and Serie A and all that kind of thing. And, I'd like to consider myself to be a football kind of, not purist at all, but certainly a knowledgeable football fan, right? I used to watch the Premier League on Sunday afternoon, 4 o'clock game, or even Monday Night Football, which I can't stand with the Carragher and Neville scenario, but nonetheless, I'd watch that. Man United in their prime, Giggs, Scholes, Keane, Beckham, and you'd look at that and you go, this is going to be a great game. And invariably, they would take it to the opposition, and the opposition would try and hit them on the counter-attack, and even if it was a 1-0 game, you'd have a really entertaining 1-0 game, but you'd often get a good 3-2 or that kind of stuff. And even Liverpool, when they didn't have some great sides, they would play great football, trying to, Steven Gerrard in his pomp, playing it to Torres, playing it to Suarez, and this kind of thing. And you'd watch it and go, this is great football. Now, as a neutral, because I've got no skin in the Premier League game, not until Middlesbrough get promoted this season, hopefully, anyway. But I watch football now with a bit of trepidation, think to myself, you know what, they're probably going to cancel each other out. And I know there's an occasional brilliant game. They are occasionally brilliant games. But Man United, you're not telling me Man United now are anywhere near watchable compared to Man United in their prime, when they weren't just a machine for winning, they were an entertainment factory. They were churning out superb football at all levels, and they've just gone back. Their level of entertainment, their level of football engagement with their fans is just disconnected. Would that be fair?
I think so. And I think some of that's also, mate, born out of how managers implementing their style of football, which has now been, you look at Guardiola and everything else like that for the last 15 years or so. You've had a lot of young players coming through, so systems at youth level are now played like that. So you've got a lot of players who are playing in kind of a very set way of expecting how to play. It's a lot of these flair players or players that just play on instinct is almost being forgotten. You can't tell me. Everyone thinks that Pep Guardiola reinvented it. I mean, I'm sure, in fairness to Pep, he won't say that. But people think Guardiola reinvented the wheel. It's like, well, he didn't. There was football before Guardiola, and it was equally as fabulous. I've talked about. I remember coming up to a match at the end of last season and just saying I was watching a rerun of a few of the seasons with Man United, and even when it got to the Van Nistelrooy era, just how good he was and how good that team were, and how they all had an individualness that linked together, but they played perfectly as a team. And it wasn't all about playing out from the back. It was just playing really quick, intuitive, counter-attacking football. You didn't have to start from the back.
And they were playing to the strengths of the individual players, weren't they? You
Players,
know,
yeah.
they were getting it in front of Van Nistelrooy for him to run onto off the last man. They were getting crosses in. You know, they were doing intricate passing, but they're doing it at pace, weren't they? They were doing
Yeah,
it,
I mean, yeah,
quickly, instinctively.
absolutely. Yeah, and Arsenal in their pomp, they weren't always playing out from the back. It was playing to the strengths of the players you had, and how wonderfully good and exciting they all were. Like from Henry to Bergkamp, Ian Wright, you know, oh, Van Persie at the time,
Vieira.
Perez and Vieira. But they were all players that knew how to play football. They weren't just all regimented to a system of I have to do this pass to this player at this time. They all just knew what to do at a given time. You can't tell me that Dennis Bergkamp was told, right, Dennis, you have to do as you're told. Dennis Bergkamp played on his own intuition and what he felt was right at that time.
Yeah.
That for me, and this is where I think and I think this is why I strongly agree with Simon's point, is I think that's also sometimes in a way been beaten out of the game a little bit.
Mm.
So we're almost terrified to play with you know,
Flair.
a flair
Flair.
and just go with your gut, an instinct in that particular moment in that match. That's football. That's how it should be for me.
I'll come to Pep, right? I think Pep, when he's, look at the Barcelona team of 2009, 10, 11, that kind of team that he was, coaching, etc. He did change the way football was being played. He didn't invent football, but he changed the way football was being played. But when they were the only team doing it, they were brilliant to watch because other teams, like they blew Man United away in the Champions League final, and Man United were just chasing shadows, and they would admit that they were the best team that they ever played at that point, and were sensational. But when one team's doing it, it's like, wow, this is, and I loved watching that Barcelona side, and you're like, as a football fan and a purist, you'd watch that and go, that's some of the best football I've ever seen. But then everybody else learns that system and they cancel each other out, don't they? And it's like, oh
Yeah.
my God, can we not? I'll give you an example. This has been recorded on the Saturday morning, the night after Middlesbrough just played West Brom and beaten West Brom. And I'll say, with all due respect to West Brom, you got a late goal. We were comfortable all night. And why were we comfortable all night? You had 58.8% possession, according to the stats on the BBC website. And West Brom did the square root of almost bugger all with that possession last night, okay? They had more passes than us. They had more possession than us. They had no cutting edge. They had no threat. It was like watching Michael Carrick football from last season and the season before, but certainly the second half of last season, where you just pass the ball for passing's sake. They had the ball. And I said to Rob, my lad, sat next to him last night in the stadium, they can have the ball all they want where they are now. And they were in that middle third of the pitch. And they passed it sideways, pass it sideways, pass it sideways, looking for the perfect pass. And they did nothing with that 58.8% possession. Yes, they got a late goal. Our keeper misjudged the flight of a cross. And they got a late goal, but even then, right? So 5 minutes left. We're 2-0 up. We get back to 2-1. They're allegedly a rival club. They didn't even threaten us once in that last 5 minutes. Now you're not telling me Man United in their prime, or Liverpool in their prime, or Arsenal in their prime at that situation wouldn't have gone all out. We'd have been hanging on by our bloody fingernails in that last 5 minutes. It was comfortable because they just went back to passing it through the middle third. You're thinking, well, you've got 5 minutes left. You need a goal. What are you playing at? And that typified for me Simon's point about football is broken. It's about managers being wedded to the system. And I'm sure that West Brom will not get battered by anyone this season, right? The solid, if lacking spectacularity. Is there such a word, spectacularity? There isn't, but never mind. Solid, but not spectacular. They won't get battered by anyone. And they'll probably finish sixth and scrape into the playoffs. But they'll do it. If they play like that every week, good God, how boring would that be for their
Yeah.
fans?
Oh, I totally agree. We said it last season when watching Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough. It was just so regimented to the point of you just couldn't do anything of any flair. You know, the only thing that was exciting last season was giving it to Ben Doak, who actually was, he was encouraged to play the way he'd been trained at Liverpool, which was
Yeah,
give me the ball, I'm going to go forward, and I'm going to try and get us into good positions.
yeah,
Exactly what you want, exciting football. But it was almost like Michael Carrick refused to do anything other than stick to his way of doing things. Like, so if you absolutely needed a goal, you just wouldn't change the way you were doing something.
no,
And I don't like all of this constant, consistent playing out from the back. It's funny because we were at Everton Villa last week, and there've been a couple of skirmishes and scares at the back against Brighton, first home game of the season. But we put us. There's this thing where Pickford's passing it to Tarkovsky, and then we're passing it along to someone else, and then it just invites pressure. And then all of a sudden, there's a rash pass and it goes out for a throw, and it's like, what are you doing?
yeah,
Either. And I'm not saying every single time it has to be a big long goal kick out as well, but it doesn't always have to start where you tippy tappy it with 3 or 4 passes between each other at the back before you even started something. So I just sometimes think, right, okay, instead of doing that, where the opposition then know you're going to do it, and Villa were doing it as well and putting pressure on themselves as well, where they do all this. It's like, what are you doing? It's almost like this obsession with having to do with this style of play or these passages of play, and yet bizarrely, I don't think that comes into David Moyes' thinking or Unai Emery's, because they're both managers who want to actually play football and find different ways of doing it. So, but they're obviously told to do it, or they have to do. I'm not quite sure where it comes from, mate. But surely, for me, it should be all about you know not always doing this. And they did it 3 or 4 times. So it's like, we have to start this way. Well, no, just start with wherever, when you've got the ball, who's in the best position and where at that time,
yeah.
and go with that instead.
You mentioned there, quite interesting, and it sometimes is about mixing it up, isn't it? The players look like it's almost like they're playing in squares, and that's my square, and I'm not really allowed to go out of that little square.
Yeah.
And if I go out of that square, then I'm gonna put my teammates under pressure. But there's the fact that you mentioned there, Villa knew you were going to do it, but you also knew Villa were going to do it. It means that they're creating more jeopardy because the opposition can counteract that, counterbalance it straight away. They're going to go, well, they're going to play out from the back. All we've got to do is press high.
Yeah.
They're never going to mix it up now. And again, this isn't a Borough podcast, but I just want to mention again, we are 6 games in. We've won 5 and drawn 1. And, the difference between Carrick ball last season and Rob Edwards' ball this season is night and day. And it's night and day for 2 reasons. One is we are playing further up the pitch. We are definitely 10 yards further up than we ever were under Carrick. And secondly, we're not frightened to mix it up. We're not frightened. We scored from a long throw last night, for example. We're not frightened to mix it up when, Saul Bryn's got the ball. Yes, he will play out for the back when it merits it, but he'll also, put it up to try and win the ball in the centre circle or in their sort of their final third. And we still play really good passing football. Our second goal was a thing of beauty last night. It was a passing move, a beautiful passing move, passed through the defence. It wasn't great defending from West Brom, by the way, but nonetheless, it's about mixing it up so the opposition cannot. Oh well, they're going to do this, so we'll just be ready for it, And I think one of the things that we are better at this season is mixing that up and being different. And you know what? It's funny that we've won 5 and drawn 1. We're top of the league at the start of this weekend by 4 clear points. The 2, I think, are not coincidence. I think if we'd have been under Michael Carrick still this season, first of all, a couple of the games we wouldn't have won. And last night we'd have drawn, and we'd have lost at Preston last week because the system wouldn't change irrespective of what's going on in the game. And that's the bit that frustrates me, clearly frustrates Simon, I would imagine. The in-game sort of wedded to a system. Let's take Ruben Amorim now, right? Okay, so Man United, I've given them plenty of praise. They were great to watch. And I should pick up on your point about Arsenal. My favourite neutral team to watch in their prime in the Premier League were prime Arsenal. Like you say, Henry, Vieira, Bergkamp, fantastic to watch. But they were fluid, they were flair, they were, they're equally likely to win 4-3 as they are to win 1-0, and you didn't know what you were going to get. You just knew you were going to get entertained. So let's talk about a lack of entertainment, a lack of flexibility. Let's talk about Ruben Amorim. What the hell is he trying to do time and time again? Clearly with players who either don't understand his system, which I don't get, or are not good enough to play his system, which I do get. If you just got to watch Harry Maguire chasing Erling Haaland for the third goal against Man City last week, it was hilarious. He looked like he had moon boots on running through treacle, didn't he?
I know.
What's that about? Why is Ruben Amorim so bloody entrenched when everybody else in the world can see that he has to change his system or change his players, which he didn't do enough of in the summer, because the system ain't working? What's going on with Amorim and his system?
Amorim, his style is that he wants his players to know multiple systems and multiple styles of play and multiple interchangeable ways of switching play or systems, or going to a flat three or playing in a diamond and all that kind of stuff. And he wants them to be able to know all these systems. And when he says switch, they would need to switch and be able to play all of these different ways. Well, that's all well and good, but I haven't seen him switch or change or do any different style of system. I've just seen them play one way since he came in. And I don't mean this as a jibe, but it's just been terrible. So I don't see lots of multiple nuances of system changes and different ways of counteracting your opposition or managing the game and saying, right, we're going to change this and bring this player into this position and do this. Now all of a sudden you see something wonderful happen. So either it's like you say, the players can't do it or just really, really struggling with it. But surely, that then strikes me as you're trying to do something and reinvent the wheel, when actually what you should be doing is saying, okay, so I've got these players, they're good players, and they are.
Yeah.
Bruno Fernandes, I know I like him as a player, actually. I think he gets a lot of stick because I think he's really trying to put it out there for United. And I think sometimes, to his discredit, he's almost gets to a point where I've seen him in some games where he literally pulls them up by the bootstraps, and other games where he's completely lost and drowned by the whole situation. And I'm thinking, this doesn't seem like the same player that they had a few years ago. And I think it's getting in. That's a shame, because I think that means that all these managers are coming in and bombarding these players with all these things they want them to do. And actually, it should be just a case of, do you know what? I want you to go out and play this really basic, simple system. Play to all your strengths. Show me what you can do when you go out there.
But I think when Bruno Fernandes, I agree with you, Fernandes. I'm not a big fan of him on a personal level. He's whinging, he's throw himself to the floor, he's all that kind of thing. But as a footballer, his stats stack up against anyone in the Premier League since he's been at United. But I think he gets lost when he's got like a Casemiro next to him who's got no legs, because he's then having to do two jobs and he's not capable of doing two jobs. I agree with you. If you look at Man United's individual players, they don't sign crap players, don't get me wrong, although maybe Højlund and Xerxes are not at that standard particularly, and I know Højlund's moved on and he scored at the weekend, by the way, Man United fans, if you weren't aware. So why don't you look at your players and go, okay, I'd love to play 3-4-3, I'd love to be able to do that, whatever his system, whatever his favourite system is, but actually in the interim I can't do that. What I've got to do is go, where do I get the best out of my players? Where do I put them under less pressure? Where do I get them playing football? Where do I get the best out of Bruno? How do I get the best out of Cunha and Bueno? All good players, but he'll wed them to a system and then wonder why they get beat, with a late goal or a 3-2 or a 2-1 or whatever. And yet the arrogance is, well, they will learn. Well, they won't learn because they've had a terrible start, the worst start since God knows when, and he's got the worst record ever of a Man United manager. They're not learning a bloody thing, are they?
Well, what concerns me is, when did he come in? Was it?
He came in the start last season.
Was it just before Christmas or something like that? When was it?
No. He came in, sacked Ten Hag quite quickly, didn't he? October, November, so maybe a year. He didn't want to come, though, did he? Didn't want to come.
No, so it's. But what worries me is, we're now. That's why I was going to ask, because I think, are we nearly a year into his tenure?
Yeah.
And I kind of think, okay, so you're nearly a year in. they've backed him as well. I mean, they've bought some really expensive talent in the summer, but again, that looks really disjointed. You can see Umberno trying his best to do something in the games and in the derby on Sunday. But again, it just seems like a mishmash of players when actually it's, they keep saying, oh, they've got rid of all the bad eggs now. Well, I don't really think Sancho was a bad egg. I just don't think he wanted to be there. If you think he's played well at other clubs and everywhere he's gone, he doesn't strike me as being a bad egg at all. And they're kind of trying to paint this picture of, oh, we'll get rid of these players, we'll bring these ones in, and everything's going to be okay. And it's funny because you mentioned there about trying to play a system or trying to get players to do this, that, and the other, and everything else. And we going slightly off piece, but it links to the subject. When you see Marcus Rashford, who came out and said he was, you could see straight away he didn't want to buy into the Amorim project, and Amorim didn't like him. And we've talked about that. I don't really think Rashford acted in the most impeccable way, because he's ultimately a professional and he's being paid a vast amount of money by his club, and he needs to get on and do it. And if he's the player that everyone says he is, he should be stepping up and trying to play for his team and be part of that. But he also has come out since, and again, I don't particularly agree with that podcast as well, where he's saying, all these things are wrong at Man United, and he wanted to go somewhere and be freer. And in fairness, he had a brilliant game against Newcastle in the week and was top draw. And we've said, again on this pod, and I said it to numerous people, if Marcus Rashford is the player that he says he is, and people keep saying he is, he needs to start doing it. And hopefully you'll start seeing that this season, because the money he's being paid and how he's pampered and everything else, he needs to act and start being that player. I'm not talking, he might be a lovely guy off the pitch, I don't know him, but on the pitch he needs to do that. But then you look at what we're discussing now. So the reason I mentioned Marcus Rashford is, in support of him, when you're saying how confused they all are and can't really play to the system he wants, and maybe that's Rashford, what he was trying to articulate is, it can make you so miserable as a footballer that you just want to go somewhere and play a more simple style of football to your strengths in a team environment where you're happy, you're buoyant, you're not confused, you're not bogged down. And maybe that's what he was getting at. So maybe he's behind the scenes, we haven't seen he's gone about it the right way, etc. But it maybe supports his argument more when you look at that they're still struggling, they're still labouring, and they look really unhappy as a team.
Yeah. Well, Cloughie once mentioned, didn't he, football's a simple game, and it's spoilt by tactics almost, isn't it? It's played on grass. And he took, let's face it, Nottingham Forest were a team of far less, potentially far less talented players than the Liverpool team of that era. And they were sensational because he just said to him, he said to the team, didn't he, give the ball to John Robertson. Robertson will beat his man and get in the box and get on the end of it. And okay, it's hankering after it makes me sound like an old fart, hankering after a simpler time. But actually football used to be great to watch when it was a simple game. And I think the overcomplication, and let's have a little knock again. By the time this goes out, he might not even be in situ. Russell Martin, I just think the guy is an absolute fraud. I'm sorry, I'm going to use that word. How the hell he's got to be manager or coach at a club like Rangers is beyond me, right? The guy has got one trick, and that one trick has been found out time and time and time again. He is unbelievably trust the process. Well, I'm sorry, Russell, the process just doesn't work. We went to Rangers before the pre-season and we were 2-0 up against them. Okay, they brought the big guns or bigger guns on. They're now 8th, 9th or 10th in the Scottish Premier League. How can you be 8th, 9th or 10th in a 2-horse race? It's a 2-horse race, Scotland. How do you become 8th, 9th or 10th? I'll tell you why. You give Russell Martin a job and say to him, implement your system. And he's trying to play out from the back. He's trying to put players under. If you're a centre half, and you've got your back to play, and your keeper rolls it out to you, and you have got 2 men on you. There's a reason you're a centre half, by the way, and you're not a creative central midfielder. You're a centre half for a reason, and it's not because of your first touch being like impeccable. So you're gonna get caught out, you're going to get found out, you're going to put yourself under pressure, and you're going to concede goals. And Russell Martin is doing exactly what he did last season at Southampton, but he's just doing it in a different league. I can't believe the guy's got a job.
It's all about possession. It's like, let's just keep the ball. Let's just keep the ball forever and pass it around
forever.
And do you know what? We might get a goal at the end of it. You know, there was a goal when he was in charge of Swansea, and I think it was something like 165 passes, took about 5 minutes, and then eventually they scored a goal. You know, and you could say, well, that's wonderful. Look how much they've held the ball. It's like, well, yeah, but it happened once. You know, and there's other times where they were doing that and they didn't get anything at the end of it. It's like, you can have possession all you like, but it's not really about possession. It's about moments. It's about doing something within, like, how are we going to get a goal here? Is it going to be about just constantly holding the ball and tippy tapping it to each other? It's like everything's gone from, they've taken a style of football in Tikka Taka football and then tried to evolve it into something that everyone needs to do. And there's this misconception that we should all have the ball on the floor at all times, playing the most magical football. Well, yes, football is better when it's played on the grass, and it's not all hoofed up and in the air all the time and constantly heading it and bringing it down. It's nice when it's at feet and you can see some really good movement and good football. But it's also about a great cross, a vision of seeing a ball and spraying it to someone, getting it out wide, and then a brilliant crossing and maybe a header into the goal. Yeah. We love that just as much as the lovely goals where, you know, like that Arsenal goal that Jack Wilshere scored against Norwich all those years ago, which was an absolutely beautiful piece of football, which was all on the floor, little dinks over the top. We all want to see that, but it's almost like everyone's now striving to say, I need to give my fans this football. It's like everyone keeps saying, oh, we need to play, say Everton, we need to play football the Everton way. Well, I'm not quite sure everyone knows what the Everton way is anymore, or whether or what it was. What we like is, we do like a skillful team. We want to see a team that plays good football and preferably plays it on the floor. And absolutely to work their socks off to the point where they're all absolutely, you know, on their knees at the end of the game because they've worked so hard. But, you know, I also think there's, as long as you're winning, and I'm not saying do it ugly all the time, but if you can mix it up and score goals in lots of different ways, there's nothing wrong with seeing a long ball over the top, bringing it down and scoring. If that wins you a game, are you honestly going to tell me you're going to walk out of the ground unhappy because you've managed to either, you know, salvage game by getting a draw or you've won it? Are you going to care how you've won it? You know, in fact, you're actually going to be more impressed that they've done something to actually see that and win. It's all about the winning the game and walking out the ground with 3 points. So do it in lots of different ways. Like, I come back to Amorim, I want them to know lots of different systems and do lots of different things, but in nearly a year in the job, I've not seen all these wonderful systems, and I've not seen you play lots of different ways. I've not seen you suddenly switch your tactics up to combat the fact that you're losing and playing terribly. I've not seen any of those things, which is why it's like, you know, you mentioned Brian Clough and it's a simple game. Well, it is. And I don't care if you go back to the 70s and it's a different game now. Well, it is to a degree, but, you know, Leicester proved it as well. Sometimes it's about getting a blend of players that come together and play the right way, trust each other. You've got a mix of hard workers, good defensive, a couple of flair players. Riyad Mahrez was in his pomp as well, and Vardy was just scoring goals for fun. But it's about knowing how to play and when to play. And you can't tell me they all just played out from the back all the time. They didn't. They were just a hard-working team that were good on the press and good on the break and did lots of different things, but did them well. So. And that's where you can do that now. You could a manager if they were clever enough could do what Brian Clough did, to getting the right players playing the right systems, you know,
to their strengths,
and giving them very simple instruction. I think players, sometimes you overload them with so much stuff that it just becomes like, oh my God, what the hell do you want me to do?
They need the brain of a quarterback in the NFL, don't they, some of them, just to retain the knowledge and the information. You know what? What happened to them being good footballers with a positional knowledge of being a left wing back or a left back or a centre half or a central midfielder or a winger or a centre forward or number 10, and just trusting them, not trusting the process, trusting them to work it out on the pitch. A couple of things you mentioned earlier I want to go back to. One is the 165 passes at Swansea for Russell Martin. Yes, it was probably one goal. However, by the time they scored, the opposition had probably fallen asleep at that point, which is why they probably conceded the goal. I think what happens when you've got a team who are obsessed with passing sideways and sideways and sideways is they're looking for a gap, and they'll pass it and pass it and pass it and pass it and pass it until one of the opposition just steps out of line, and they're looking for that perfect pass, aren't they? And that rarely comes. This is why it was a one-off 165 passes. But in that 165 passes, my question would be, apart from maybe the last two passes, where was the penetration in that? Where was the viewing experience? Absolutely zero. Absolutely zero. And the other one, going back to Leicester, was, first of all, their team spirit was sensational. And secondly, Leicester City invariably came off that pitch looking knackered. They'd left everything on that pitch.
There. Yeah, they did.
Everything out there. Not on everything out there on a system, had left everything out there on their personal energy, perspiration, effort, sheer desire, sheer will to win. And they were a pleasure to see winning. They've given hope to everyone, haven't they? And I know it was nearly 10 years ago, but I don't think that'll ever happen again, because it's a once in a generation, if not more, thing. And that's by the very nature, they don't happen very often. But actually, when you look at things like team spirit, and you look at sort of flexibility, and you look at the approach to winning the ball back and getting in the face of the opposition, we're describing there, aren't we, non-league football, League One, League Two, some Championship football. You're not describing much in the Premier League about that. Most of the Premier League football, for me, is about retaining possession, finding little ways of, getting through the gaps and all that kind of thing. And don't get me wrong, occasionally sensational goals, sensational games. But I am much less enthused. So tomorrow, we're recording this on the Saturday, as I say, after the Middlesbrough game against West Brom. So tomorrow, lunchtime today is Liverpool versus Everton, and obviously you've got skin in that game. But also tomorrow there's Arsenal versus Man City. Now, you'd look at Arsenal versus Man City historically 10 years ago, and you'd go, "Oh, I can't wait for that. Absolutely can't wait for that." I'm sat there thinking, well, if I don't watch it, I'll watch it on Match of the Day. But actually, I might watch it if I watch it live. But at half time, I wouldn't be surprised if they've both cancelled each other out for fear of losing, or for the fact that tactically they are both counterbalancing the other without concentrating on their own tactics. Let's stop them instead of let's actually do what we're good at. And I'm kind of, if I don't watch it, it'll probably be 4-3. If I do watch it, it'll be the most boring 0-0 ever, and that's just unfortunate how it works sometimes. But I'm less enamoured. I'd much rather watch today, and I know you got skin in the Everton-Liverpool game, I'd much rather watch Leicester versus Coventry. Mainly because I've got skin in the game as a Borough fan, but also I think it'll just be a different game of football.
Yeah, and Coventry are really expansive, and they're scoring goals for fun. Coming back to styles of play, I mean, ultimately, I think Mikel Arteta is just copying Pep Guardiola. I just think I don't really see him implementing his own way of doing things, his own style of play. I don't see it. I don't particularly enjoy watching Arsenal, I have to say. I'm not having a go at Arsenal. I just don't. But then equally, I don't particularly enjoy watching Man City.
No.
I think we've said this multiple times when we've chatted at games and stuff. And I've said it to a lot of people. I mean, you've got to admire Man City for how they go about things, and they just find a way of. And if they're struggling in a game, they'll tweak something and just elevate it. Often it's just how quickly they can move the ball. And they'll catch teams away because they can move the ball from side to side so fast. I think what Guardiola tweaked and what he did at Bayern and then Man City is at Barcelona he implemented a way, but that was around really skillful, top level, world class players.
By the way,
it worked.
By the way, tiny little players as well.
Yeah,
so they weren't big.
Yeah, but it worked. But then at Bayern and Man City, he didn't have that luxury. And let's face it, and credit to him, he's never, apart from like Haaland, and he's never really gone out and bought a world class player. He's brought players in who he's then elevated to a level where they've become much better and potentially become world class because he's brought them in and improved them. But he's kind of used that same system, but he's done it in a very mechanical, methodical way. So they're very, very good at retaining possession, passing between themselves, holding that ball, knowing what each other's job is, but almost to a point where, and again, it's a different subject, but you could argue it. It's like, yeah, he made Jack Grealish better, but I think he also stifled Jack Grealish and made him play very much to a certain type of, and took the individuality and the intuition and the spark out of the player, but made him into a team player in terms of that team's very functional, extremely good at what they do, and they'll just be able to win everything because of how they play. Is it enjoyable to watch? No. I'm not having to go at Man City fans who are listening. I'm not. I'm really not. I've said this time and time again. I don't enjoy watching Manchester City. I just never have. They're very good at what they do. I enjoy little pockets, individual bits, and some of the goals they score. I enjoyed how they played last week against Man United, but they were playing a really poor team, by the way.
Yeah.
And I do think Haaland's an absolute animal. He's just brilliant to watch. But as a team, they just leave me a bit cold. Arsenal do the same thing. And I think it is down to this. We need to play a certain way that makes us almost invincible in terms of we can hold the ball really well. Our ball retention's fantastic. And then we'll try and do something off the back of that. When actually, you're then losing the joy of the actual game. The flair of the game.
Let's take the Arsenal visit to Anfield in recent weeks. So I think Arsenal set up not to lose.
They did. Yeah.
And I'll tell you now, I think Arteta bottled it, and they were beaten by a piece of brilliance from Szoboszlai, and you know what? That's what. No, you gotta look at that and go, okay, well that's just unusual. And if you're beaten. We conceded a goal at Preston last week, the first goal. People go, oh, we should have stopped it. It was a great first goal. The guy scored the goal. I can't remember his name. Great goal. Credit to him. He dropped his shoulder, put it in the top bins. We could have stopped it. We could have stopped it. It was a great goal. Sometimes you're beaten by a great goal. But Arteta, I think Liverpool were there for the taking that day, and he just bottled it because he didn't want to change his system. And his system's designed not to lose. It's not designed necessarily to go out and win.
He time wasted as well. He's a notorious time waster. They do it all the time. They did it last year at Goodison. It's like, Jesus, you're time wasting against Everton at Goodison Park. But they were doing it at Anfield. And it's like, come on, you've just spent all this money on all these elite players and you're time wasting. And he does it all the time. And you can't tell me that he'll deny it till he's blue in the face, but it's deliberate and they've been told to do it. That's shameful. That's absolutely shameful. That even comes into it, that you are playing for a draw and time wasting.
I'm going to pick you up on that. It's clearly a massive bugbear for you. This is about the third time in this podcast series.
I hate it. I understand it to a degree in the last maybe 5 or 10 minutes of a game when you're trying to, and all teams do it. I get it. I do get it. And I suppose if it's on the other foot and you're winning, you can tolerate it a little bit more. But even then, if I'm on hand on heart, I mean this, I would not want my teams to be doing it, and I would certainly not want them to be doing it when they're 0-0 away from home, trying to play for a draw and deliberately time wasting. It's like
in the first half. Yeah. Borough last night, we conceded with 5 minutes to go, which included injury time. And we slowed down our throw-ins and we slowed down our whatever. But that's 5 minutes.
Little bits,
5 minutes to go is different to first half and whatever. So I'm worried about my choice of viewing tomorrow at 4:00, whether 4:30, whether I decide to sit down and watch a stifling 0-0 that they're basically just looking for a chess game, or whether I decide to give it a miss and it turned out to be one of the Premier League classics of all time at 4-3. But I suspect I'm nearer the first one than the second one, and I'll just have to live with that. We'll find out by the time this podcast goes out how wrong or right I am, but I suspect it'll be a bit of a turgid affair, and it'll be settled by a piece of brilliance by one or the other teams, maybe like the Liverpool game, because neither team want to lose, and that's the difference. So going back to the very first point that Simon Jennison made was, are we less entertained than we were 10, 15 years ago? Simon, I'm in your corner, mate. I've got no skin in the passing out from the back, tippy-tappy football, 165 passes, find a gap. If we don't find a gap, retain the ball, rechurn it, etc. I'm a purist. I like football to be about, getting at them, retaining the ball with good skilled football. I like when you lose the ball, getting it back quickly. I'm loving watching middle of this season for all of those traits, and it's early days after 6 games, but playing 5, 10, 15 yards up the pitch, our retention of the ball's still pretty good, but our regaining the ball when we lose it has been different class. It's been what has made us a lot stronger this season. And when we get the ball, we try and vary what we do. So we scored from a long throw last night, and we scored from a piece of team brilliance. It wasn't a system. It was a piece of go out there and be, and play football. And our front three are fluid. You don't get fluid front threes in teams that are wedded to a system. You get, this is where you stand, this is what you do. And Simon, I'm with you. Football is worse for watching now as an entertainment than it was 10, 15 years ago. Dom, final question. Do you agree with that statement?
I do agree overall. I think I think people suddenly think that football started 15 years ago when, Guardiola took over Barcelona and then brought it to the Prem. I mean, no one ever said Mourinho played good football, because he didn't. I mean, the Mourinho way of football is just
shocking.
Awful, absolutely shocking. But people forget how good football could be played and how well it was played. The likes of, we've highlighted it, how good those Alex Ferguson teams were, the Arsene Wenger teams were. But just in general, if you go back, everyone, and just watch some, historical games from 15, 20 years ago, there's some wonderful games out there, wonderful football played the right way. So yeah, I think we've wedded ourselves to this way of playing and can almost kind of hoodwinked ourselves that it's the right way to play football. But actually, when we break it down, it is a lot more stifling, and it doesn't work for every single team, because it can't work for some of the players and for some of the teams. So yeah, I think overall I would agree with Simon. It's made it less of an interesting spectacle.
And if you're not sure and you don't believe us, go and watch your Premier League years from 2001, 2004, 2008, and just watch that. It's just a different pace. It's a different sort of directness. And some of those games and goals were exceptional. Of course, we get some exceptional goals these days, an exceptional piece of skill. But my God, you have to wait for them sometimes, don't you? So on that subject, Simon, thank you so much for suggesting that. I hope you enjoyed that episode that you've inspired. And Dom, thanks as ever for being a great co-host. We always finish with the, for those who are watching on YouTube, just the sort of the outward slides, as it were. So we've covered episode 14. On episode 15, which we're going to release shortly, we're going to talk about two things that are controversial. The 3 p.m. Saturday blackout, what does that mean? Should it be lifted? And what would be the implications of doing so? And something that's been mooted, and I don't know how real it is, it's probably more than social media news because it's made it to mainstream news, is proposed changes to the championship playoffs, where you could potentially qualify for the playoffs by finishing 8th. Now, you might be able to tell from the tone of my voice what my view on that might be, but we'll leave it for now for episode 15. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share on all your favourite podcast platforms. A share's really good, a like's even greater. We really appreciate your support. We're growing the podcast kind of listener base and viewing base slowly and steadily, but it's going up quite regularly, which we appreciate. And please feel free, like Simon's done and like Steve Atkinson's done on a previous episode, suggest some subjects. We'll give it our best. We'll talk about them like proper football fans talk about them in the concourse and in the pub. But without further ado, Dom, thank you so much again for being a great co-host on the Half and Half Scar Football Podcast.
Thanks, mate. More than welcome. Loved it. Really enjoyed it, and echo your sentiments completely. And I really enjoy talking about subjects that listeners have suggested. So yeah, I'd encourage that even more. We really love it, and we really appreciate your support. So thanks, everyone. I'll see you on the next one.
Have a good weekend, and good luck to Everton in the Merseyside derby in about half an hour. About half an hour. All right, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers.